Hello.
Well, everybody, yeah.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm really glad everyone is here this afternoon. Thank you for coming. My name is Dallas Cohen, and I am incredibly blessed to be here. I met Miss Sartura some years back, and you just never know. It's always good to be kind in general, but you just never know who you're going to meet and how things might go progress, you know. So I met her, and we was like, oh, let's get together. Oh, and then you know how you say that to people, and then you don't get together. That's what happened. And then, and then years later, after a lot of changes happened in my own life, I reached out to a colleague and said, "Hey, do you have speakers at your place?" And she says, "Oh, I think so, but let me connect you to the right person." And there was Satura again. And I was like, "Where do I know you from?" We're both, "Where do I know you from?" And come to find out, we had met those years ago. And I was like, "Oh my gosh!" And even that, the opportunity I was looking for wasn't happening the way I thought it was. But she said, "I'll tell you what, I'll tell you about Dr. Tracy's house." And I said, "This is fantastic." So I'm really, really blessed to be here. Thank you so much, Dr. Tracy, for hosting this. Thank you, Sartora, for connecting us and connecting this. This is fabulous. And the way I normally start when I share this, I say, I'm very happy to be here. And that I mean that two ways. I'm glad to be here with the book and talking with you, but I'm also just glad to be alive. Um, this is, of course, Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and the reason why we're doing this here now is to talk about domestic violence. I was married for 10 years to a man who wanted me dead, and so much so that January of 2020, which was not a long time ago, he left for another woman, and it wasn't the kind where people say, I'm leaving. They kind of give you an announcement. That's not what happened with us. He just kind of left, and I didn't know where he was. And then I found out where he went. And the next day, I found out him and that woman had been plotting my murder, and had been doing so for months by the time I found out. And the short version of the story, and since we have a lot of time today, we're going to go into some of the longer version of the story. But the short version was, I had a choice to make. I could allow kind of who he thought I was supposed to be to tell me who I was. And I'm known as the rebound coach, but backing up, before I was the rebound coach, I was raised by two godly parents. They loved God, they loved each other. They were married for a lifetime, until my mom passed in 2003. And I saw she was terminally ill, so I saw what it was for a husband to care for a wife and kind of be a caretaker. So they were a great example. At the same time, I was molested from age 8 to age 16. And that's really common in our culture, in African American culture. I don't know the stat, but I think it's like 50%. I think it's like 50% of Black girls, Black women, had some sort of sexual abuse in their life. Um, it's either 1 in 3 or 1 in 2, something like that. But it's very, 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 very common. So when that happens when you're young, that radically affects how you see yourself. For me, in a faith-based household, how I saw God and how I related to men. So eventually, when I did meet the man that I married, there were definite red flags, and I write about them. I'm a pretty detailed person, so I kept journals, and there's a lot of journal entries in this book. Um, there were definitely red flags going on, but number one, I believed that God was with us. I'm a praying woman, and so when I went to God about it, I was getting yeses from God. And for me, let God be true and every man a liar, right? Even myself, even what I think I understood, right? God knows the future. So I trusted God that this would be different. Number one, I believed God was with us. Number two, I believed that because he was with us, whatever trouble would come, we'd be able to overcome it. or at the very least outlast it. That was kind of my mission. I was just gonna outlast the trouble. If I did my part, as wives, I would study how to be a good wife and how to honor God in a marriage that was difficult. And I didn't find a lot of the support I was looking for. When people kind of got a whiff of what I was dealing with, they all would say leave. And I don't know what this is, but something would rise up in me like, no, like I'm gonna fight for my marriage, and this is important. And something. Like if that's how you press a button. You press a button, you get a principality of darkness come out. Like that's what would happen. And so I didn't find a lot of support for staying and fighting for the marriage that I wanted. And so I created spaces for that. And so I was already a coach. I've been coaching 20 years in one form or another. And if anybody's watching or doesn't know quite what that means, a life coach is someone who helps other people get unstuck in one area or another. And so my area was relationships. Before then, well, I have commingled passions. Relationship is one, and someone's destiny or purpose is another. So when I started coaching, it was around your purpose and rekindling your purpose and helping people build their dreams, which I still do. But I was doing a coaching, and when I got married, I was like, this is so hard, and I couldn't find help for situations like mine. And so I started coaching and helping women in difficult relationships, whether they were dating someone or married to someone, where they believed that that was who God wanted them with, but all hell was breaking loose. And so I did that for like 5 years. From 2015, I wrote my first book out of a separation. When she was 9 months old, I was pregnant with this one, 6 months pregnant with this one. We had a separation over adultery. My former husband was a serial adulterer. And so that's not something you hear about. That's not something I heard about. I would hear about the traditional adultery, if that's a thing, where a husband goes to a workplace and is seduced by someone at the workplace, right? And they've got this long-term thing. I knew about that, but what I didn't know about was the 5 or 6 or 7 women in your inbox or on your phone, and then I would find out about them, and he'd get rid of them, and then a couple months would go, and there'd be 5 or 6 more on Facebook or through text messages. And I thought, well, this is just emotional adultery, right? And somewhere inside, I said, well, I don't think I could take it if he did physical adultery. Well, truth of the matter is, there was stuff going on. I had no idea. I had no idea the depths of how far things had gone. Um, and and God did it in such a way that I had to make moves because I wasn't gonna. I was that person. I was really dedicated to my marriage, to being married, and so the first book came out of that separation, where I would say, "Oh, we've been restored," but that wasn't the truth. The truth was, I left and I went back. That's what the truth was. Um, because the choice was, all right. I know he doesn't want to change. He's not willing to change. He's not ready to change. So my choice is, I go back and allow things to continue as they were, or I stay gone and break up my family. Well, I thought breaking up a family was the worst thing you could possibly do. God said so, society said so, church said so. Like, that's the worst thing you could do. And I care about my children. I cared about my legacy. I cared because he came from a family of divorce, and I didn't want to continue that. And that would be a generational curse, and we were supposed to be changing legacies. That's always been something God gave me to stand on, changing legacies. And so it was a big deal. So then I decided I'm going to go back home. I didn't want to have a child outside of wedlock or in a separated family. I was a good girl, right? I waited until marriage. I raised up in the church. I did everything I was supposed to do. I married the person God said, even when I thought that wasn't the right thing to do. Right? So I sure enough wasn't going to be the one to break it up. So went back home. Things continued as they did, and progressively got worse. So we got into this cycle I call coping in crisis. So if you've ever heard somebody, and if you know somebody who's in a rough relationship, and they go, "Oh, it's not bad. Today he was really nice. Today," like they're counting their victories in hourly increments. This is how you know you're in a coping and crisis cycle. And we definitely were. And so we get to a place where we're surviving. So everybody has a rhythm that works for them. Our rhythm was very isolated. I get up and go to work. He didn't work. That was another big issue. He did not work. And so I would go to work all day. I'd come home. We'd argue. We'd argue so bad he'd leave the house. I'd cry myself to sleep. Wake up in the morning, do it again. That was our cycle. That was our cycle. And so that was coping. That was coping. Crisis was mental breaks. So he has schizophrenia, paranoid schizophrenia. And I knew this before we married. And people would go, "Oh, well, you knew, so you must deserve this that's happening to you." That's not how this works. That's not how this works. What I did believe, and I write about this in the book, when we see somebody who's in a domestic violence situation, we go, "Oh my gosh, that came out of nowhere. This is a monster, and he must have hidden all his monster qualities and like sprung them on you at some point." And there's a lot that goes into who that woman is to make that behavior okay for her. Has nothing to do with him, like he's doing whatever he's doing. But I was predisposed to being okay with that sort of lifestyle. And I write about that. I write about that in the book. How my mom was sick, but we didn't treat her like she was sick, and we didn't treat sicknesses like sicknesses. I don't know if that makes sense, but if you're like in a family of faith, like we wouldn't say stuff like so and so is sick. That's We don't treat somebody like they're sick. And everything is a spiritual issue. There's not. So y'all feel me? So when I met him and I saw what the issues were, to me it was like, oh well, God's gonna fix this. God's gonna deliver him, and all I need to do is be an intercessor and cover him, because that isn't that what we say wives are supposed to do? So I was doing lots of that, um, and so that part of his dysfunction, I didn't say, well, this is so bad, it's hurting me, I need to leave. And my I guess assignment I took on was to love him well, and that's something that I see often in women in these situations. We kind of take on, and we call that overfunctioning. That's the big word. Just kind of doing their job for them, trying to do their job for them, the way we mother children. Okay, because children come, they can't do anything. We do all their stuff for them, and it's a way to express love, to do your stuff for you, right? But when we meet a man who can't do his own stuff for him, some of us, especially those who you come up, if you've done caretaking as a child, that's a natural proclivity. I show my love by doing your stuff. So he didn't work and he didn't have to, right? I was mad because he wasn't working, but I also didn't tell him he had to work, right? I would tell him I wanted him to work, and he would play the game with me. Yes, I want to work, right? We'd play this game. And nothing would happen and nothing would change. Nobody would say anything about the lack of change. We just do this dance, right? So that was the coping. The crisis would come in a Baker Act. So if anyone doesn't know what a Baker Act is, it's a law, at least here in Florida, where if you are considered a harm to yourself or to someone else, you are mandated to get mental health assessment and mental health treatment, a minimum of 3 days. That's the law. It would be a little awkward depending on the circumstance. and I actually it was hard for me to pick things to read to you, um, because it's I don't know that was hard, but I can read some of it. Read if you guys are into like Law and Order. Anybody do the crime shows? This is totally gonna be your jam. I love those things. Like if you're like into solving the mystery, because this reads like a thriller. It's it's a little crazy that this was my life, and when you're in it, you don't realize all of that is happening. But in the midst of having to take care of some things, if there was in legalities, they asked me to pull up any police reports. And so, of course, I did a search, and there was something like 26 police incidents over 6 or 7 years. I'm just like, I can't believe this was my life. This was my life. And sometimes, if you don't, I wrote stuff down, and that's not what's happening here. So I totally wrote stuff down. I am a planner. Yeah, that's not what's happening. But um, sometimes when we think about domestic violence, you think about someone who hits you, right? Or someone who's drunk, or someone who, in faith-based circles doesn't know the Lord, right? Um, but if you have something else, you think, well, that's not what I have. He's just angry. He's just moody. He just has these, but I'm his person. I'm gonna help, right? I'm just gonna pray. And I had other people praying with me. Like I had whole campaigns going on because I'm that chick. So I had like fasting cycle, like a whole thing. But it really doesn't matter. So part of my process of healing was God, I did everything I was supposed to do. Why, mostly why. And we can't overdo someone else's will or someone else's choices. God doesn't even do that. So when we're praying, we are expressing our will to God. Sometimes that is also his will. But even if I want him healed, if God wants him healed, he doesn't want him healed. That's it. And I knew that I had a way to help people in their relationships. I knew that I was intended to change covenant legacies. I thought God was going to heal this marriage, and we were going to stand side by side one day and help, right? Um, and I thought I could outlast trouble. Well, truth is, I did outlast trouble. That is what happened. Just not the way I thought it would be. And if I didn't have this story, we wouldn't be here today. So again, I wouldn't have this book. We wouldn't, this conversation wouldn't be happening. And whoever's going to see this later, so all that to say, you can, number one, you can be following God and still end up in a whole heap of trouble. That's number one. Number two, like the Bible says, those who trust God will not be put to shame. And I thought there was a lot of shame, in my situation. If you can imagine building an entire identity around being married and staying married, like that was my platform. Okay, I'd been a coach, like I said, all those years, maybe 5 or 6 years in relationships specifically, and done all these events, and oh my gosh. So part of my reluctance, of course, you don't want your family broken up, but part of my reluctance for changing the way I was going to live was like, oh my gosh, what are people going to think? And the truth is, no one, and I thought, man, they're going to be like, she can't do her stuff no more. No one left. No one shamed me. It's been a miracle. It's been a series of miracles. How I had support I didn't know I had. I had love around me I didn't know I had. People came out the woodworks with like money and chickens. Okay, I have to tell you the story. So the girls would go to school. and they go to a private school, Christian school with lovely people that serve the community that I was connecting you with. So locally here, Grant Park Christian Academy and Faith Action Ministry Alliance is just a fantastic organization. And so they went to school there. It was really important that we didn't change that for them. And so they were just amazing people. And they were sending home food with the girls in their backpack. And one day somebody had a farm, something like that. But there was a raw chicken in a bag one day. That's all I'm saying. It had been refrigerated. It wasn't frozen, but it was like it was cold. And it was in a bag, and it was in like Walmart bags. It was like so and so had a chicken. We wanted you to have it. And I was in the midst of. I know. But I was so thankful. I was so thankful, and I didn't even have a way. I was moving, okay, it was moving to save our lives, and I didn't have a way to cook the chicken. I had a friend bringing her pot to my workplace, and we cooked the chicken, and it was smelling good in the office. I'm like, this is mine. I took it home. Oh my god! And I won't forget things like that. It just people just did anything they could to come around us, and I wasn't trying to leave. So January 6th is when he left, and I found out. And January 5th, as a matter of fact, I should probably read it. Let's see if I can find it and read it to you. Hang on. And we'll have time for questions too, because I want this to be a conversation. I think I found it. I'm going to sit down too. So this can be a good conversation. So this is from chapter 8, Perfect Storm, and just to set you up so you know what's happening. Right before then, the weekend. This was a Sunday. I'm about to read you. But right before then, he was Baker acted because he called the police and said I was dead. And this wasn't the first time. This was probably the second time that had happened. He had called them earlier. The police came. They're like, listen, he's not saying he's a danger. We can't do anything. And I said, this is crazy. This is crazy. And I sat on my porch and I said, what am I going to do? What do we do at night when it gets worse? It always gets worse at night. And I said, listen, and the police, I'll never forget, the police said he had been coming out over the years. And he's like, I've been coming out over the years and I can see he's getting worse. I'm like, dude, if you can see it, then what you think I'm trying to tell you? And I'll never forget, he looked at me, this white police officer, and he says, the only person who can do anything about this is you. And I was like, nuh-uh, I called y'all. But of course it did get worse that night. And he had called the police and told them I was dead. And so they came out looking for a dead body. And I was very much alive. And talking to them, and I said, I told you, one of the guys was still on his shift. He came right back out. I told you. And so they said, well, we still can't take him based on, what's going on. So well, maybe ask if he wants to go. Just ask. And so they did. And he went for like a couple hours. He wouldn't be seen. He wouldn't take the medication. So they had to release him. He called me. He's like, come get me. I said, no, stay the night, please. And he didn't. He got a ride back to the house. And so eventually, though, the police told me about this thing called I don't remember the technical term right now, but it's where you go to the court and you ask them to mandate that a person gets help. And so they said, well, if it's as bad as you say it is, and so did the person at Grace Point. So locally, y'all know Grace Point is the mental health facility in the area. And so the same lady on the phone, I explained what's going on. I forgot what the name of it is, but anyway, they said, go to the courthouse and do this. So I did. And the judge approved that he can get some help. and the police came and took him to the mental health facility so he can get some help. And so this was a couple days into that. It's January 5th. Zachary, who I name him in the book, that's not his real name. I've changed names for obvious reasons. It was Sunday, January 5th. Zachary was still in the hospital. There was a knock at the door from the police. Yes, I have a bit of PTSD when I hear police knocks on the door. There was a friendly officer at the door. Hi, ma'am. Is Zachary here? His wife, Isabel Ruffin, is looking for him. Are you his ex-wife or something? I would hear a sigh. Is this happening? Is this really happening? I explained to the officer that Isabel is not his wife. She's just one of the many women from Facebook, and they haven't even met in person. Zachary was in the hospital under a Baker Act. He said that Isabel had called them and said that she was his wife, and she hadn't seen or heard from him in 6 days, and she was concerned. Monday, January 6th, is the anniversary of my deceased mother's birthday, and it's a day I'll never forget for another reason. On January 6, 2020, I was working from home. The Christmas break wasn't over, and my kids were still home from school. Suddenly, I heard loud banging on the windows and doors. Someone was shouting, Zachary, are you in there? I'll break this window. She banged on the window 3 times loudly. Zachary, my kids remember they were there. Yeah. I looked out the peephole. There was a light-skinned woman, short, with a head covering, skirt, and distinct black Hebrew Israelite fringes on the border of her shirt. Surely this was the adulteress. So side note, that's the kind of religion he was into. I opened the door in my t-shirt, sweatpants, and fuzzy slippers, just a crack, and I said, I'm calling the police, and shut the door. Call them! I bet you won't call them, she taunted. I moved back away from the door and called 911. My kids came out of their room asking what the commotion was. I hurried them back inside and told them to go shut the door and stay there. Who knew what was about to go down? When the police arrived, she was barking at them and said they weren't doing their job because they weren't searching the house. How do you know he isn't there if you don't look? She barked. I have proof of abuse. He had told her that I was abusing him. She told the police she was Zachary's sister and that he was a preacher on Facebook and he hadn't posted in days. They gave her a trespass warning that if she came back on the property, she would be arrested. She was also on the phone with someone. I saw the paperwork that said the person's name was Jamie Wilson. I also called my father-in-law. I didn't know what to ask for, but sure appreciated him leaving work to come over. He arrived while the police were still there. Standing at the door, watching more drama unfold at my doorstep, the phone rang. It was Zachary saying that he had been released from the hospital and was asking for me to come get him. Your adulteress was just here, I hissed into the phone. No response to that. My father-in-law went to get Zachary from the hospital. I needed a restraining order, and yesterday. I fed the girls and packed them up for another trip to the courthouse. By the time we were ready to go, Zachary was back home. The girls ran up to hug him, but he only patted them absent-mindedly. He was manic and high energy, although his frame didn't move much. He didn't acknowledge me at all. After one look at him, I was gobsmacked. This man was still out of his mind. Where was the compliant and nice Zachary from 2 days ago? We had already been to the hospital. What was I gonna do now? I looked into his dazed eyes and asked him what was wrong. Everyone is using things against me, he said. I'm not using anything against you. I tried to comfort him. He was looking down, agitated, manic, dejected, confused. I wanted to comfort him in that moment, hug him and tell him that we would work this out, that it was going to be okay. But something very strongly told me not to touch him. There was a strange energy coming from him, and I'd better not. I love you, Zachary, and we'll be back, I said. He nodded and said, I forgive you for everything you've done to me. To that, I nodded, took the girls out the door to head to the courthouse. That was the last in-person conversation I had with Zachary and the last time my children saw their father. When we got to the courthouse, it was 4 in the afternoon. I asked for the restraining order because of stalking and flipped through the thick document in the courthouse waiting room. I didn't have the information it was asking for. I didn't know this Isabel's person's real name. Also, if Zachary was still involved with her and Jamie, a restraining order against them for me wouldn't be enforced. The court was about to close for the day, and I was out of time. Plus, something internally just didn't feel right going through with this. It wasn't the right move. I packed things up, took the girls back home. We were probably gone an hour. When we got back, he wasn't there, but he had his Besorah scriptures, it's a particular version of the Bible, blaring through the house, Psalm 119. He had his boots on the floor in our bedroom, eerily pointed towards the door, with Paleo Hebrew writings all over them. I knew that was something symbolic, but I didn't know what for at the time. I turned the blaring scriptures off and waited and waited and waited. I was terrified of where he was and what he might do when he got back. I texted my close friends and those not so close that I thought could get a prayer through. Please pray, I texted tersely. My husband is out of the hospital, but he is not okay. I don't know what's going to happen now. Please, I don't know what to do. After several hours of pacing, praying, crying, and putting on a brave face for the girls, I was sitting up in the bed wringing my hands when I got a call from Zachary. He had an elaborate tale to tell. I'm going to take a pause there. So, um, he told a really long story that wasn't true, basically, about where he was and what he was doing, and that just wasn't true. So once we found out where he was, I had about 30 days. That was the beginning of January. What I was told was they have until the end of January, and then they've got to leave where they are. They're trying to come back and kill you. So the person who was banging on the door and windows kind of was an accessory to the crime. She knew what the plot was. She helped him get to that particular adulteress, and they were the ones plotting together, and she knew about the plot. He had believed for years that God was going to kill me because I was rebellious. I didn't submit to him the way I was supposed to, and God was going to kill me for that. I didn't hear it a lot, so it was easier to not think about that. Right? I would only hear it after a really, really, really bad argument. He'd say something sideways, and I could ignore it for a while, and then I would hear it again. I said, God is not your hitman. Like that's not how this works. And he, disagreed with me. But even still, I thought, well, he thinks God is going to do this. So as long as God doesn't do it, I'm good. That's what I thought. Um, and come to find out, when he got with her, he told her that she's like, well, God's taking too long. You need to do some stuff. As a matter of fact, God told me you need to do these things, and would tell him to do things, and then he wouldn't do them, and she'd be upset, like Samson. And hindsight's 2020, right? You're piecing, I'm hearing what's going on, and piecing the stuff together. I'd wake up with him standing over me, not doing anything, just standing there, and I say, "What do you want?" And he go, "Never mind." And he walk out the door. And I never thought that was connected to anything other than I don't know why he's wandering in there. And I got those pieces because that same person who knew about that, after that whole incident, she would call me. That's how I found out what was going on. She was blowing up the phone. They call and you hang up, they call again, you hang up. And I picked up the phone. I was at work. She knows what work is. I was at work, and I picked up the phone, and she said, "Please don't hang up," because I was gonna say, like, if you keep calling me, I'm calling police again. I don't know what they're gonna do, but I'm gonna tell them you calling me. And she said, "Please don't hang up. I called to apologize. I just need to tell you I'm sorry, and I need you to know that they're trying to come down." And I sent them up there, and now they're asking me to get plane tickets for them to come back down. Now that they're together, they've changed the plan, and I'd found out that they already had like two plans that didn't work by the time I found out what was going on. Because God, he knew everything, and things I had never heard. That this person, Jamie Wilson, that I just read about, she knew things. I went back to my kids. they had answers to fill in the blanks too. So what Jamie was saying is true. I didn't know if I could trust her in the first place, right? Like you was on the other team. I don't think I believe you. But she was telling the truth, and then it became a choice of, all right, what are we gonna do? I still didn't want my marriage to end. I didn't want my family to break up. Um, but I was like, okay, so if you don't get out of here, they're coming. Would you like an attack? No, I don't think so. I don't think I want that. And God made the door clear. And what I tell people is, you don't have to have it all figured out, because I didn't, and I wasn't really trying to get divorced. I just needed to be safe. So there was just the first step that's in front of me. I write about having, while all that was going down, I had to go to a friend's house just because the atmosphere was just really, it was really not safe for me and the children. And so I went to my friend's house just to pray. I couldn't, if I tried to pray, he'd stand over and hover. So I couldn't have any privacy. And so I asked my friend, hey, can I just sit in your study and just talk to God? She says, yeah. So I was like, I need to bring my kids too. So we all came. And so sitting up there, and you try to journal and you can't, there's no words. You can't, like, nothing's happening. Like, God, please help is all the only things I can get out. And I tried to write it down and nothing was happening. And the only thing I heard was, call your father-in-law. That's it. Okay, I can do that. Call my father-in-law. He knew history, right? He knew his son and history, but he didn't know all the other stuff. And so I filled him in a little bit. He came in and saved the day, man. And I never asked him for anything all the years. I never asked him for much. So all that to say, there was already support there. And I didn't have to have the whole thing figured out. I just said, hey, help. I need to stay for a couple of days because I had left just for a couple hours. I said, oh, I'm running to Marin's, I'll be back. And I didn't pack anything. So I was like, I don't want to go back to that place by myself. So he went back with me. He helped me pack. When it was time to move, he helped me find a place. He hired people to move us. Just amazing support that I wouldn't even know was there. So that was just one step. I called a pastor friend of mine who's been around for a while. I consider her my covering. I couldn't do that then. So, side note, I do these lives, Facebook lives every week on Tuesdays. And so this month we've been talking about domestic violence. And I'm talking about spiritual abuse. I've been talking about different kinds of abuse each week. Talking about spiritual abuse this time. And one of the many restrictions I had, I couldn't have a pastor. I couldn't go to a church on a Sunday. We couldn't do birthdays. There was just a lot of restrictions. And then as the years progressed, they got worse and worse. And I wouldn't fight most of them, but when it came to hurting them, I would fight about that. It came to restricting me. He got mad. I wouldn't use a certain name for God that he was using. I wouldn't use it. And he told people I hated God for that. Just anyway. So I had called them and said, hey, this is what's happening. Can you come pray? So they came, and they didn't say, Dallas, you need to leave your marriage. Dallas, you need to get divorced. It wasn't any of that. They just prayed with us and said, well, maybe one day you won't live here anymore. My apostle is just the sweetest lady, when she wants to be. And that was one of the days she needed to say something without saying it, right? So she was really wise in that way. And I say to people who have friends, don't tell them what to do, because it never worked for me. When someone said, well, why don't you just leave? Like I said, I would rise up in defense. That was never effective. When people were just present and just loved me wherever I was at and whatever I was standing for, when it came time that I needed that kind of help, they were ready and willing. And I would hear people say things like, well, I didn't like your marriage. I didn't like what I saw. But, I was being respectful, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And there were others who heard him say, and I found it this later too, people who heard him say, "My wife's gonna die." Like and that I just don't understand. Women and men, so men that were his friends, and then women that he would talk to. And a woman said, "Well, I couldn't say anything to you then." Why the heck not? I don't understand that, y'all. If you hear somebody talk, if you hear somebody saying that their spouse is going to die or anyone is going to die, don't just let that go by. Don't be silent. Call an authority. Call somebody. Tell somebody. God, I don't understand that, but I know that God was looking out for me, looking out for us, and and though life is radically different, it is so much better. It is so much better. We have peace. My girls are healthy and amazing, and I'm in awe of them. I really am. It's kids who go through much less do much worse, and I'm amazed by who they are and who they're becoming. And even if they can sit here and listen, I don't let them read this book. Um, and even though I read parts of it to them, like it's gotta be difficult from their vantage point. But I'm gonna pause and take questions or comments because that was a lot.
I have a lot of questions. I was sitting here trying to think, but the last thing you said that, and during my brief stint with that is one of the things. Don't. That's the last thing you say. Tell somebody because that can create a more volatile, more deadly situation. But when you said that you that it was you appreciated him not infringing in on the situation.
Mm-hmm.
But when they heard things and they didn't tell you,
Those were different people.
okay,
So the people, my circle of friends who I would go to and say, my husband's not letting us celebrate Hanukkah. So I'm Hebrew by faith, and so he didn't have that history when we met, but when I shared it with him, he gravitated quickly, and of course went to the fringest of the fringe of the faith. And so when I would go to somebody and say I'm distressed because my husband XYZ, what I needed was someone to listen and someone to care, not someone to tell me what they think I ought to do.
right, I understand that part. And sorry, my fingers come out now.
It's all good.
I'm holding on to my.
It's all good. I talk with my hands too.
But I think I don't know. I think in relationships, when you see things from somebody's relationship and you haven't shared it, but I see it, But then I think that puts your friends in a situation where, I'm thinking to myself, that puts you in a situation where some woman not give you advice,
Mm-hmm.
not tell you what to do, but oh my God, I want to ask you for opinion. So I want to say, I heard you say that he what you did.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes with our upbringing, our culture, they said, stay out of business
Mm-hmm.
because she get mad at you and it's back to that man tomorrow, and
Mm-hmm.
then so that whole scenario is so complicated.
It is,
So
and it's absolutely true. Um, when I say for people to say something, he would talk to his buddies, and his buddies who would be in my house and smiling in my face. His buddies who I thought was my buddies too. Not in the same way, but you have family friends, people who I thought were family friends. Once this story was out and I had a book and I was in front of cameras saying this is what happened to me, I'd get inboxes. Oh, what he used to say. That's what I'm mad at. That's what I'm at because you were there. You heard the crazy. That's different than I don't like how they're interacting. It looks kind of weird. That's she hasn't said anything, but that's a little different than he used to say that you were gonna die because you weren't submissive. But I couldn't say anything. What? Blanket blank not. Right. That's what I'm talking about. To me, they were different perspectives. You heard the crazy and didn't do anything, versus the people who were my friends and not his and didn't talk with him much, but heard me. That's what I mean. I see my little girl with her hands up. We'll be coming back. Yes, ma'am. I don't know. I don't know if that's the same. So we'll have to talk about it. And they say that thank you, sweetie. She gave me a good word of prophecy. She said that's not true because you're gonna be a and you're gonna have an awesome life. I'll take it. Take it. The little baby prophets. So that's one of the number one questions I get. Well, number one is how are the children? Number two is where is he now? That's not something I talk about publicly. Okay. Yeah, this is a real, these are real people. So I don't, and they have access to this. Yeah, I'm live streaming. Okay. So that's not something I talk about. Okay, so then one more question. Yeah. I'm sorry. This is question time. You're mad because I did that. Relationship with your father. So obviously you say the man is trying to at the end. But that was his son. So I think I don't know. It's a short answer, but I think no one knew how deep and crazy it had gotten. Because you might see somebody who's a little they don't have the social skills. Oh, they're a little so and so's a little off. But murder plot is like, what? I didn't know it had gotten that far, and I lived with it. So someone who didn't, I don't think he knew. I don't think he knew. Now, I know you said that you all were different. So, did you, during the marriage, for this thing, or did you, it's a good question. I really appreciate that question. So, as I mentioned, I was Hebrew roots before we met. And Hebrew roots essentially is a Christian who follows the first 5 books of the Bible. So the Torah is the first 5 books of the Bible, the feast days, the laws in the Bible. That's in a nutshell. That's what it is. And so he had been raised up Christian, so we had the same cultural faith history. And then he was like Rastafarian for a minute. He was trying to be Nation of Islam for a minute. The militants. So he really attracted to that. And so when we met, I was going to a Christian church, and he was going with me for a while. And then it was like, well, you can't go to church on a Sunday. We can't go to this church. And then he pulled me to something else. And then it was like, well, we can't go to church on Sunday at all. Okay. And so now we're going to sit home. And then when it's feast day time, so the Bible has certain feast days for his people, which are really amazing. But we could never do those together as a family. Like he would find a way to make it divisive. And so my training was, that's your husband, that's the head of your house, you need to submit, you need to be obedient. So it was a really tough kind of dance to do, where I needed to respect whatever new rule he came up with that day. And it was really like it got to the point he was throwing out groceries because, well, this is shellfish. No, he would say, because we don't eat shellfish. That's in the Bible, no pork and shellfish. But I wouldn't buy shellfish. Obviously, I wouldn't buy that stuff. That wouldn't be in the house. But he'd find stuff and say, well, this has sea salt, and sea salt comes from scraped off shellfish, and I've got like crazy stuff. So it's what started off like, and then okay, if you're a spiritual person, you can see God gifts somebody, right? So he had real gifts from God, real calling from God, real prophetic anointing, like that was real. So part of me was like, surely God, you will just heal him and then use him because the gifts are real and they're good. And he had a call to preach clearly, but the stuff he was saying was not so good. And I can't. We would do healthy debates at times, but I couldn't spend a lot of energy on things that didn't directly affect us. So when he was leading us off a cliff, I'm gonna stand up and say, hey, no, I don't want to die, right? But a lot of the rest of it, I had to let him do what he's gonna do. There was people following him. There still are online right now. People following him and letting him lead them.
So
Let's read them, shall we? The question was, when you look back, what are the red flags? I'm going to see if I can find them in this book. Because the ones I saw when I first met him and the ones later are different, right? Okay, this is from chapter 4, The Rocky Road to the Altar. Thursday, December 20th, 2007. Dear Diary, so on Tuesday, I met this guy on MySpace. Don't judge me, MySpace. Named Zachary, and surprisingly, I like him. On Tuesday, we talked online all day and 3 hours that night. Same thing Wednesday. Today, we talked online briefly. He asked me to call him in the day, but I said I was busy and called tonight. He's black, he's 22. He's got some maturing to do, but don't we all? So, the red flags I see so far: he's studied and practiced many religions, including Islam. He's been in jail twice for a few days each time. He was in a gang. He has an uncharacterized discharge from the army. He lives in a treatment facility for the mentally ill. Ding, 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 ding.
those weren't just red. Those were
Blaring neon signs. It gets worse. He takes drugs for schizophrenia, but hasn't taken any for 8 months, and he seems fine to me. He doesn't go to any church right now. When our almost 3-year courtship began, I think there was a fascination on my part at first. He was such an enigma. He had many words, and his thoughts all seemed so high and lofty. He was high energy, and his presence was electric. He was very, very religious. It seemed that most of what he talked about was God and the Bible. He said he was a Nazarite, a special consecration that people took to dedicate themselves to their lives and their lives to God. In the Bible, Samson was the clearest example of a Nazarite. They vow for a season or a lifetime to abstain from grapes and strong drink and from touching dead bodies and cutting their hair. Zachary was a lifelong Nazarite. That meant, on top of the normal dedication of the believer not to sin against God, he gave himself additional requirements because he was so dedicated. He talked about hearing God's voice and seeing things in the spiritual realm from early age. There was a lot of promise in these characteristics. Someone who chooses a lifelong consecration has or wants to develop self-discipline, right? Someone with high self-discipline wouldn't force his way on me and should be good with money and following rules. I was a rule follower, so this looked good. I'd come to know my Hebrew roots and was practicing a messianic Hebrew faith with Christ as Savior, also observing the laws and feast days found in the Old Testament for about 5 years at that time. And he seemed open to learning more. Hearing him talk about the spiritual realm was mesmerizing. I'd known many spiritual experiences growing up and currently, the kinds you can't talk about at church, and I didn't have many others in my world that I could trust with that information. I could share a side of myself that only few had seen. Certainly he could be trusted, being so intelligent, spiritual and all. surely his character would match, right? There was the conundrum. His life didn't bear the fruit of a self disciplined, spiritually gifted man, but there seemed to be an explanation for everything. He couldn't keep a job for very long and would quit or get fired within days or weeks of starting a job. He would talk about his assignment being complete at that place or it not being the right place for him. I'll stop there. But those were some red flags I initially saw. But again, if I don't know, I just it between how I was raised and my own experiences, it didn't do it.
So you looked at him. There's feel that there's so much that I can change this. I can take all of those things that are the red flags and I can fix it.
I didn't use the word fix, but yes. Um, I wanted to come alongside, and he seemed like that's what he wanted, right? Like even after the first date, he says, "Well, what could I do better?" I was like, "What? That's a weird question," but I answered it, right? I'm a people helper, and he played that role like he wanted that kind of help. Um, and then of course when he became a husband, it was I have authority now, so it was a shift, and I needed to play a role of a submissive wife. So I couldn't do the same, and you're not supposed to, right? So wives, you're not supposed to like mother your. I think that's not the right role. So things shifted, but the train had left the station. Yeah. So
Found out that you stopped taking medication 8 months.
so I didn't believe in medication. I didn't believe in, especially psychotropics. And I still have some issues. It has its place, of course. At that time in my life, everything was a spiritual thing, and so the drugs just make spiritual things worse. And he just needs deliverance. We need to break off generational curses. Like that's where I was. That's where I was. So not taking medication, and I'd seen him on medication. I'd seen him off. And to be honest, I would rather have the raving bear than the zombie, because that's what it was in my experience. That's not everyone's experience. But when I saw him on drugs, that was much worse. I had no use for the zombie. But at least when he's a raving lunatic, at least he has agency of his limbs, right? Like that's where I was.
What do you think is the first step once you left? Okay, what was the first step?
So she's asking, after we got safe, what was the first step to healing? Breathing, just breathing, man. I didn't want to figure anything out. I didn't want to have any plans. I just wanted to breathe. I mean, I was so blessed that I was able to. I had a job that was safe, and I could tell my leadership what was happening with me, and they gave me so much grace. I mean, that was January 2020. A couple months later is the pandemic, right? So everybody's at home. They gave me so much grace when I couldn't keep up to my normal standard of production. They knew, you know. I my stuff with the spring. So when he left Grace Point, he was released from Grace Point, but they thought he might be a danger to the children. So they contacted DCF. So if you can imagine all of that, which I read to you, like all that happened, and the next day I'm at work and there's a, hey, I'm from, you're kidding me, right? This is not happening. They came to my office. Do you want to come inside? No, I don't want to parade DCF through my office. No, I don't. So can we take this outside? And so they talked to me. They went to my children's school. They talked to them, and he was gone. So he's in the wind. I don't know where he's at. Well, we think you need services, and if you say no to services, we're going to go to court and make sure you have services. Okay, so I'm saying yes to services. So they're in my house 3 days in a week, 3 times a week in the beginning. So if you can imagine trying to deal with your husband's gone, they're trying to kill you, you need to work, you need to get your kids to school every day. Oh, and DCF comes 3 times a week. And there was a social worker and a psychologist, therapist. Those are the people in my house. And so when I found out what I found out, they were the ones I told. I mean, you up in here, you need to know the business anyway. Well, this is what's going down. And so she was the therapist was one of the first people to say, well, I want you to write down, give yourself a timeline of events because there's a lot going on. There's a lot happening right now. Kind of write it out for yourself. That helped me inform this book because I had a really good log. This date, this happened. That date, that happened. That date, that, and it helped for court. And it helped me to kind of get my bearings on what was going on. And she was also the one to say, here's this card to the spring. I need you to call this number and make an appointment. Okay, I'll be back Thursday. It was like that tone. And I was just, that was the step in front of me. I didn't know what was way down. I just knew the next step in front of me was to call the number the lady said to call, make an appointment, and then show up. That was it. That was it. And breathe. Keep breathing. What's the next step? Keep breathing. What's the next step? Really. I was there doing intake at Spring, with my children there, and I had gotten a call from my CEO, which I don't get calls from CEOs. Okay, I was we weren't there, so I had done something wrong, and he was not happy. He's not a mean guy, but like I don't get that kind of attention, so it was weird. And I was like, oh my god, I'm freaking out, and I called my direct report. Hey, I got a call from so and so, and I must have done something wrong. And I said, I'm at the spring, and I could hear her voice go, I could hear the shock. She's like, don't worry about it. I'll talk to him. Just, it's okay. It was so nice. That she, I got it. It's all right. But I'll never forget, like, those kind of memories are seared in. The first step, you just breathe. Just breathe. Sleep as much as you need to sleep. You don't have to, you can be mad, like, be mad. That's part of it. I quit the ministry. I'm not coaching nobody ever again. Arr, like all of that. You need to do all of that. Yeah.
I think people don't understand trauma and it's trying stuff. And I think sometimes people are in a self inflicted as a friend. So your friends are trying to help and everybody around you is trying to help you fix the situation. But like you said, sometimes like let me process this. Let me empty my brain. Let me not think. Let just be. And and that's why I asked you what was your first step. Because a lot of times my sister would fix it first. And she goes to the, where I am, I'm very emotional, but I need to go through those emotions. I need to let me go through all of this. Then now let's figure out a plan. But yeah, just and if I can answer the question, I ask
Okay. And that is part of fixing it, holding space for that person. So I have a friend, the friend you met last week we were here, my best friend, Malikia. She lives in Chicago. And I would call her when this stuff was going on. As a matter of fact, I write in the book about a time right when everything was happening. He had two rods, and I broke one. You have to read it because I can't tell you all the details. It's just a lot. But I broke one, and he had another that was about as thick as one of those mops or broomsticks, so it's too thick for me to break. But he was poking me. Yeah, that face you're making. So, so it was, and I called my friend just so that I wasn't. unseen. So just there was a witness, and she's just on the phone. She's not talking. Nobody's talking. She's just letting the line is just open, and she's listening to me breathe and cry and talk to him. And I said, "You can't." He was poking me like softly, not like attack, but poking. I said, "You can't do that. This is my body. I have rights to my body." And so he stopped for a minute and kind of thought, and then came back and said, "Well, the Bible says your body is my body is your body. I don't have to stop." He did stop, but that was his comeback. So in the middle of the trauma, while it was unfolding, God gave me the presence to at least call somebody. Just call somebody. That was helpful. And she wasn't saying anything. If I cried, she just, I'm sorry. Like that's it. Just someone who's present made all the difference in the world. Made all the difference in the world.
Talk about, but are you still in touch with your father?
Yes. Yeah. And I talk about it in the book. Jamie Wilson, who I told you who she was, and my father-in-law were witnesses for me at the injunction hearing. When I tell you God does a thing, God does a thing. That was crazy, crazy and amazing, and we didn't even need it. They were there as witnesses, but they didn't call any because he incriminated himself. That those details are in here. Screenshots, receipts. I'm not kidding you. All in there.
It's been where
This is next. um, this book has already blessed so many people, whether or not they had a domestic violence issue. Um, if they had any kind of situation where they're trying to do everything themselves, or couldn't feel the love that was around them, it's already making a big difference. So I'm here to speak, which has always been a thing. So it's amazing. I looked back at when God first called me to the ministry. I put that in air quotes because that's weird to say out loud. Um, but, he told me then that he would use my testimony, and before I had one, before I knew what this was, before I knew what this was. So speaking and sharing and coaching, I coach specifically high achieving women who have lived through betrayal, trauma, and abuse in any form, who want to reclaim territory in their relationship with themselves. Because that was the big missing piece for me. I loved him well. I didn't love me any. That was a big missing piece. I didn't see myself, couldn't see myself, and I felt so invisible. But it wasn't just no one out there could see me. I wasn't looking. I didn't even, I didn't recognize myself. People treat you the way you treat, right? People expect of you what you teach them to expect of you. And so I taught people to expect me to serve them, but not to be served. I taught them, you don't have to see me. My needs don't matter. My needs didn't matter to me. So how could they possibly matter to anyone? Okay, so there was an entire paradigm is not quite identity. There was an entire identity that I was standing in that made this situation possible and allowed it to last for as long as it did. And I will spend the rest of my life pulling anybody who wants out of that identity out.
I had that thing like every time. No, I'm, I, I thought everything was and and other times
And you can't love your neighbor if you don't love yourself. You can be kind to your neighbor. You can do things because you think you're supposed to do them, but you can't really love your neighbor until you love yourself. You're gonna give them what you give you. And people don't believe that. Like helper people, helper church lady people don't believe that because they're like, man, I self-sacrifice. I've given my everything for this other person. And we do that out of duty. We do it out of trying to earn someone's, we do it out of all sorts of things, but not love because we love us. Our needs have just as much value. And there was a moment the Holy Spirit spoke to me. And you ever say something, you'd be like, where'd that come from? That was not me. I heard my mouth say it, but it wasn't me. I had such a moment, and while all that was going down, and I looked down at him and I said, as much as I love you, I love myself also, and I can't live like this anymore. As it came out, I was like, what? What was that? and he just paused for a minute and he looked at me and he's like, are you sure you're being abused? And I was like, yes, and I can prove it. That was another thing. Wait, hold on. But it was true. It was true. And loving yourself means you're not gonna tolerate certain treatment. It doesn't mean you gotta be rude and nasty. It doesn't mean you cut everybody out from your life. It doesn't necessarily mean that you end a marriage. But it does mean that you don't tolerate certain things and you treat yourself in a way that's honorable to you. I I missed that class. I totally missed that class. And I don't know if anybody's really teaching it. But I like let's do that for the rest of my life. Let's do that.
I'm listening to your baby talk and having worked like 8 years at a program for just girls. I know for a fact that this type of dialogue is not made available to girls, I would say like 10 and under, middle school girls, high school girls, but not the young. And I just think this is also, this may be, um, this is not me directing your path, but putting it before you that this, I, your story, especially that you have these girls with that you have, I mean, you've done the protection, protecting them, but you're not shielding them from what what they experienced. They experienced, they lived through, they were there. And I think there's not too many opportunities, not there for young kids who are experiencing with their parents, their families, their aunties, or dad. I just think that there is a opportunity out there. Let's get Dr. Craig out.
Wink, wink. You saw that, right? Okay.
But I honestly think because there are so many avenues and platforms to heal, to coach, to guide, to mentor the adult in any situation. But the children are not getting that same type of strong support, especially the younger people. They're, right now you hear there's no money, there's no money, there's not enough staff. But I just think that this is an opportunity to. I saw it, but I'm looking at the speaker. I'm looking at the person experience, and I'm looking at the face they look up. And I just think that this is an opportunity to share their stories with a younger population.
Something. I don't know. I'll marinate on that. We'll see. We'll see. It's not easy. It's not easy at all. You know. And people, I've been sharing bits of the book or bits of my story on Facebook, and I get DMs from concerned citizens. Is what I'm gonna call them, concerned citizens. And say, well, you can't talk. You should talk bad about your children's father. One day they might see this post, and they might rebel against you because you talk bad. And I said, well, Thank you for your concern. Um, my children have witnessed portions of the story I'm sharing, and one day they'll have to reconcile with their own memory. That's what I'm preparing. Rebellion has its own reward. If that's what happens, we all get what we got, right? But it's hard. It's hard. My babies love their dad, and it's hard for them to hear this stuff. And that's why I'm amazed by them. Yes, baby.
Where are we going to tonight?
Mm-hmm.
Like, when Daddy is using he works in bed and he out out
That's what?
that felt pretty
She's an empath. So who's that? It's not easy. And I stand in anointing and I stand in confidence, but this is my real life. These are my real children, and we're really processing a real thing. Um, and it's not easy.
What about you and
Yeah, so I did that. Right end of January is when we got to our new place, and the authorities were still in the picture, and that's one of the things I'd asked for before they closed the case. I said, hey, can we get them some therapy? And it was virtual because that's what the world had just started doing. So we did that for several months with Bliss, and they said, oh well, they're doing fine, and we have so many sessions that through the insurance, whatever. We want to leave some on the table, and they seem to be doing well. Are you sure? What about this? Did you talk about that? What about this? Like I'm that mom, and half the therapist was like, Dallas, it's okay. They're doing very good. So we did that. We did that, and should we need to do that again down the road? Sure. I had my own therapist for a minute. So, some of them are just not that professional. Like she was an all right therapist, but like she would not show up to appointments and stuff. And then I was like, well, I'm better than this. That's part of, and I'm still learning. So even my relationships with my friends and how I self advocate or choose not to self advocate, like I am still learning those degrees. And so I share the things that I'm on the other side of and can say, there's 10 steps and I'm on step 4, but I can show you steps 1, 2, and 3. Like that's where I'm at. And as I grow, I'll be able to help others.
now? I have a question. I know that you were very against brother. How were you feeling that day when you were kids?
By then, I was okay. And theologically, I'm still working stuff out. To be honest with you, because when you believe something for so long, it doesn't change overnight, no matter what happens. So I am in that process, in what I call deconstructing, or what is called deconstructing, not just from that, but from patriarchy as a whole and complementarianism. Like that's a whole other conversation. But the paradigms that set up my situation, I am examining every day. Yeah, I'm still in that, and I didn't. I was at court for the protection order, and that's the Rod that I told you about. He had texted Jamie Wilson, who was there as my witness. He had texted her, "Look, see this rod? She broke it. I was going to attack her with it." That came out in the hallway of the court, and my lawyer turns to me and says, "Dallas, you have to divorce." And even at that point, I'm still like, I know what everybody wants. Please give me some space. I'm not there. Just can we just do one thing? I just needed to get safe, and then I don't want to figure that out. And she had told me here's called Bay Area Legal, and I didn't want to for a while, and eventually I called them just to start a process, and then pandemic happened, and that slowed things down. But I needed it to be slow. I needed it to be slow, and I was like, I'm not. I told my friend, I said, I'm not ready. I don't like. I just need to just wait until I don't know when, and then pandemic came, and I could wait until I didn't know when. And so very slowly, this okay, go get your records, okay. So that process was incredibly peaceful because we were all isolated, and the way that just the way that things happened. Because of the way things shook out, no, and that goes into details I don't quite share publicly. Yeah. Sorry.
Everything that people do, the illness, the other that that's taken by what they're
Yeah. Yeah. So I that's another thing I do. I want to talk on, mental illness advocacy spaces because it's really important. Um, the courts understood. Um, the courts understood. Now, when I was calling the police to my house saying, please take him away, and they said, we can't take him away because someone's rights are what they are, and we have to follow, what the law says. But they saw the disease progressing, and even the mental health professionals told me to go to the court. I forgot the name. The name is it's gonna bug me. But go to the court and petition the court to get the help you need. So when we stood before the judge and I read his Facebook post where he says, I see, I have a vision of a husband blowing a lit fuse to his wife's heart. I'm laughing because it's just outrageous. And he's not blowing it out. Now I know what I must do. I must be obedient. This is the post, and it's a public post. Like anybody can see that. So we didn't need any witnesses after that because it was pretty apparent. Yeah, so the court understood. The mental health people understood, and that's not everybody's case. And I continually thank God because people have very different experiences. It doesn't go smooth for everybody at all. Um, and all I can say is it's the grace of God. I don't have any other explanation. All of it, is the grace of God. Everybody still alive?
yes,
That's heavy stuff, y'all.
yes. Very like with your the domestic violence has been around the beginning of time, and everybody's situation is different. So when you're able to be transparent and share your experience, because some people said it really that may not have considered that because there was no bruises, and no cuts, and no burns, and anything like that. But there's something left of that up. So we appreciate sharing your story.
I appreciate the opportunity to share it, and I'll say other things too. Physical abuse is, they might hit you or push you or something, but also holding you down or taking your keys or your purse or your phone.
Access to your phone.
Yes, yep. he would ask, and he did ask about my life insurance policy. Of course. When you're playing for someone to die. He asked about my life insurance policy. He asked for the passwords to the bills, just all sorts of stuff. Or punching holes in walls. We had that, or punching holes in the door. A door frame was broken because I'd locked the door, and he, burst through there to get to me. All those things count. All those things are signs of abuse in your household. And when the therapist came and she says, "We're here because of some violence," I looked at her like, "What violence?" I don't have violence. I have a crazy person, but not violence. Yeah. Mm-hmm. All of it. Yep. Go ahead.
There's one thing that we've done how lots of things go out there with and I'm just gonna be better.
But y'all made those holes.
Yeah.
That's not the same. They made those holes. Well, if you or someone you know needs to hear this story, I spend 2/3 of it telling the story, and the last third I spend encouraging people and teaching them how to choose life for themselves. And in my healing, someone had encouraged me to write affirmations on the wall, so I did, and affirmations like, "Dallas, you are victorious. All things are possible to you through God. You are worth it all." And one of them was, "I choose life." And so that's when I was looking for a title that just jumped out. He had a plan for me. My ex-husband had a plan. It was not a plan for life. So I could let that tell me who I was, or I could choose life. So rewriting your love story and changing your legacy. Love story is not just romantic love, but how we learn to love and be loved is our love story. And that's something that we can intentionally change. We can't always do that when we're kids. We get what's handed to us, but we have the power to make that change as adults and to change what our kids get handed to them. And that's what I'm doing. That's what I encourage others to do. These books are $25, and I will sign it for you. We do cash, check, Cash App, PayPal. I think maybe anything else. Look, my kids are she making it rain over there. But I just want to thank you all for your time. I'm still here for questions, so thank you, everyone. Both my girls are so good. Oh, look, we're getting pictures. Uh-oh, be careful. Ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
for having
you.
us.
Yes. Look, who can take a camera? Oh, you take Tammy. We take a picture.
It's my phone too, and I'm gonna turn this off. Oh, it's still lasting. Very good. I'm gonna turn it off now.
And good night.
Oh my goodness.